When I was 13 years old, I stood in the South Dakota Badlands and looked up at the amazing night sky. There were no bright lights from cities, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But I never want to experience it again because there's a devil living in the Badlands, and it loves the darkness there. Growing up in a normal childhood, the worst thing that could happen was when a friend moves away. It's like losing a piece of your daily routine, and it feels like nothing can fill the gap they leave behind. People always say they'll keep in touch, but as we grow up, it gets harder. Time goes by, and the void left by the friendship becomes just a memory. For me, that friend was Wyatt Plum. We were inseparable from the ages of 5 to 13. We did everything together, and his family became like a second family to me. I often had dinners with them or went on small trips and vacations, and Wyatt sometimes joined my family too. That's how I got to know Wyatt's grandmother, Ma Plum. Ma Plum, as the family affectionately called her, had spent her whole life in South Dakota. She and her husband Pa owned and ran a ranch that had been in the Plum family for generations. She would have loved to stay on that old ranch forever, but she had been battling Alzheimer's and dementia in recent years, making that impossible. Ma, Wyatt's grandmother, had a sickness that not only made her forget things but also changed her memories into scary ones. Imagine your own brain making the place you love the most into something that terrifies you. That's what happened to Ma. When Wyatt's dad got a new job that made them move for a while, they took Ma along. They thought being in a new place, far from the ranch in South Dakota, would help her feel better in her last years. For the most part, it worked, and Ma seemed somewhat happy, even though she didn't really remember me. Every time we met, her kind nature still showed. But she carried some of those scary thoughts from the Badlands with her. Ma spent a lot of time alone in the Plum's sunroom, looking out the window. Sometimes, I heard her talking to herself, but I figured that's just what old people do. I couldn't resist trying to understand what she was saying. One summer day, while Wyatt and I were playing outside, I decided to sneak back into the Plum's house and see if I could figure out what Ma was mumbling to the shadows in the room. I crept down the hallway toward where Ma was sitting by the window, feeling like a secret spy. The house was super quiet except for Ma's rambling voice. Standing just outside the sunroom's doorway, I could finally hear what she was saying. She mumbled, "My boy. Took him, yes, he did. He took him away. Whoosh, gone. Took away my coal. Never see him again. No, not once the devil's got him. Coming for me next, Gotta keep watch. He's gonna want to be paid in full. Couldn't say no. Wouldn't dare. Dem boys should never have gone out there. Shoulda known better." I listened for a bit, but her words stayed jumbled and mysterious. I started worrying that Wyatt might wonder where I was, so I went back down the hall and headed outside. When I rejoined Wyatt, the stuff I heard from Ma was heavy on my mind. If I was better at being subtle, I might have brought it up gently. But instead, I blurted out, "Who's Cole?" with all the smoothness of an idiot. To make things worse, I quickly added, "And why does your grandma think the devil took him?" Wyatt gave me a look that was surprised and embarrassed, then looked down at his shoes. We stood there in an awkward silence, my not-so-smart question hanging over us like a storm cloud. "So, you heard her, huh?" Wyatt finally spoke up. "I guess that was gonna happen sooner or later. She sits in there talking like that a lot." Wyatt slumped down, and I was worried he might not tell me more. "Cole is my uncle," Wyatt explained. "He got drunk one night. Well, actually, he got drunk every night. But one night, he wandered out to the ranch in the dark. Nobody ever saw him again. No trace or nothing. How is that possible? Didn't they do a search party or something?" I asked. "Sure, they did. They looked for weeks," he replied. "But Ma and Pa didn't live in a place like this." He pointed to the boring suburbia around us. "They live in the middle of nowhere, in a place called the Badlands. I guess it's kind of famous for being a place where people go to get lost." "Lost?" "Yeah. From what Dad told me." Wyatt's voice was quiet. "It used to be where bandits and cowboys would hide out in the Old West. They would ride in there with the sheriff or a townsfolk mob on their tail, like those Western movies, and then disappear into the maze of rocks. They figure Cole wandered in there drunk, got confused, and lost his way. Maybe he fell and injured himself or just passed out. Then something got hold of him. Like the devil? I said in awe. No, you jackass, like a coyote, Wyatt said. Oh, I said, feeling defeated. So why does your grandma think the devil got him? You mean besides the fact that she's a bit crazy, he snapped. Who knows? But after Cole vanished, I guess that's when the dementia stuff got really bad. She kept ranting that the devil was out there looking to get her, looking to get us. It freaked my dad out to hear her talking about such nonsense. Nobody was sure what we were gonna do with her. So when my dad's company got business out this way, it made sense that we'd take her with us. She's way better than she was, but some of that crazy talk is still in there, you know? Stuck in her brain. It's tough. I decided to stop asking more questions. Even though I still wanted to know more, I could tell Wyatt didn't have the answers. Pushing him would just make him feel bad without helping me understand better. We never talked about that conversation again as the years went by. When Wyatt and I turned 13, about 3 years after I learned about Cole, my parents told me something had happened to Ma Plum. I felt sad, thinking she might have passed away in her sleep. The next week, when I saw Wyatt, I expected him to be mourning. But instead, he was angry. He finally got Ma, Wyatt said as I approached to offer my condolences. I don't understand, I replied, surprised by his tone. Who got her? The devil. Same devil that got Cole. But you said that wasn't true. You said she was just crazy. Yeah, so what? I thought she was crazy. So did everyone else, Wyatt said, getting angrier. But I was there that night. I heard what was said in her room. Saw what was left after. I think what happened to Cole was more than some demented ramblings. Wyatt's story went like this. On the last night Ma was seen alive, Wyatt struggled to fall asleep. He felt scared for no reason, his heart raced, and he couldn't explain why. Unable to sleep, Wyatt got up for a drink. Passing by Ma Plum's room, he heard a voice. At first, he thought Ma was awake, talking to herself in the dark. But then he heard another voice, a man's voice. That made Wyatt stop. He stood there, silently trying to understand the conversation. Even though Ma's words were all jumbled and hard to understand, Wyatt heard every word from the man clearly. I'm sorry you feel that way, the man said, being polite but firm. You asked me to help you forget what happened, and that is exactly what I have given you. Ma replied, but Wyatt couldn't make out what she said. I disagree. Respectfully, of course, the man replied. In my opinion, my end of our agreement, based on your vague request, has been met. Which brings us to our other problem, payment. I am still owed for what I have given you, happy customer or not. You made our deal, then ran away to this place without paying the price. Did you think I wouldn't find you? Again, Ma spoke in jumbled words. I will have my payment, the man insisted. You can give me the one that we agreed on, or you can give me another, but I will leave here with what is owed me. More words from Ma that Wyatt couldn't hear. You understand what that means? The man asked, sounding a bit surprised. You would belong to me for eternity. Is that what you want? To that, Ma answered yes, the first word from her that Wyatt could understand. Very well, said the man. Then there was a quick clamor of noise, followed by an awful eerie silence. Not sure what to do, Wyatt stayed in the same spot beyond Ma's bedroom door. He waited for what felt like a long time, hoping for any sign that there were still people on the other side, but no other sound reached him. Alone in the night, Wyatt gathered the courage to approach the door. He knocked softly. No answer. He spoke in a hushed voice. Ma? Ma, it's me, Wyatt. Are you awake? There was no reply. Worried, Wyatt decided to check on Ma. He grabbed the door handle, turned it, pushed the door open, and stepped into the room. But it was empty. After Ma disappeared, my family and I spent all our time helping the Plums. We cooked for them, comforted them, and kept an eye on things while they worked with the police to find Ma. Nobody believed Wyatt's story about what happened that night, except for me. Wyatt got embarrassed because people didn't believe him, so he stopped talking about it. I think he started thinking it was just a dream. After many weeks without finding Ma, the case was closed, saying she was a dementia patient who wandered off and was presumed dead. I later learned that this is a common problem, and it's why many places have systems like silver alerts today. I felt really sad for Wyatt and his family, but things got even worse. With Ma officially declared dead, Mr. Plum decided they had nothing holding them back from moving back to South Dakota to be with their other family. My best friend in the whole world was going to leave me. That's why, on the last day before the big move, when Wyatt said he had a way for us to stay friends forever, I agreed right away. When he explained the Blood Brothers ritual, I didn't even question if it was a good idea. Sitting on the floor of Wyatt's empty basement, I watched as he used my old Cub Scout Swiss Army knife. First, he made a small cut on his palm, then did the same on mine. Blood trickled over our skin as Wyatt pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. He reached out, pressed his cut palm against mine, and read a chant. Quick cuts of skin. Set free the blood. And ask this deed be true. That with this pledge. Our blood oath bonds. My spirit flows through you. After the chant, I felt our hearts beating together in the cuts of our palms. In my young mind, it felt powerful, like we had really connected. The next day, Wyatt and his family left for South Dakota. We tried to keep in touch, but as I said before, adolescence and distance are tricky for any friendship, especially in the early days of the internet. Over the next year, our contact became fewer notes and letters. Looking back, part of me wishes our friendship had ended there. That the day we became blood brothers was the last time we saw each other. That our childhood friendship could be a happy memory. But it didn't end there. A year later, I stood next to Wyatt as we faced the darkness of the Badlands and learned the truth about Cole and Ma. A truth that shattered the bond we had forged in the years before. When Wyatt's family moved at the beginning of the school year, things got even tougher for me during adolescence. Wyatt and I were always together, so without him, I felt left out among my classmates. I had hoped to find a new identity for myself, but no matter what I did, I couldn't fit in. Luckily, my parents noticed I was feeling down. By the time summer came around the next year, they had a plan for me. Instead of moping around at home for 3 months, they booked a trip for me to spend 6 weeks with the Plums out west. I spent the first 2 weeks with Wyatt and his parents in Rapid City. But the part of the trip I was most excited about was our visit to Pa Plum's ranch in the Badlands. The Plum family's ranch looked just like the Wild West I had always imagined. A dusty prairie stretched as far as I could see, with dry bushes here and there and big rock formations in the distance. On our first day there, Mr. Plum and Pa showed us around the ranch. Pa complained about the everyday problems of being a rancher, like dealing with pesky coyotes bothering the livestock and prairie dog burrows causing trouble for the horses. As we walked back to the house after the ranch tour, I noticed Pa looking up at the sky with a thoughtful expression, much like Ma did back home. Then, he smiled at me and asked, "You're a city boy, right?" "Yeah, kinda," I replied. Pa said, "It's gonna be clear skies tonight. Wyatt, you should take this one out at dusk so you boys can camp under the stars." Excited, Wyatt turned to his dad and asked if we could. Mr. Plum just looked at Wyatt, gave a small shrug that meant yes, and then went inside to help with dinner. After eating, Pa got us ready for our night adventure. We packed the important stuff like canteens, Maury's supplies, a fire starter, bedrolls, and a small tent. Since we weren't going to be out for long, we didn't need much, and the ranch was just a short hike away. The most interesting items to me were the spotlights and a pair of old .22 rifles just in case. When we asked why Pa and Mr. Plum weren't joining us, Pa explained, "It ain't summer vacation for the rest of us. Some of us have to be up and working before dawn." All set for our adventure, Wyatt and I walked out the door into the fading daylight. We headed southwest instinctively, towards the border of the Badlands and the setting sun. We didn't walk for long, maybe 30 minutes, just enough to get away from the lights of the house. Then we set up our camp. We gathered deadwood for a small campfire, arranged the food, and laid out our bedrolls so we didn't have to sit on the hard ground. As the sun disappeared, we roasted marshmallows and made s'mores. With our tummies full of sugar and our small fire turning into embers, we lay on our bedrolls, heads together, and looked up at the sky to take in the beauty of the stars. I had seen stars before, but that night was different. It wasn't just a starry sky, it was a burst of light covering the heavens. I remembered learning about the Milky Way in school, and now, away from city lights, I understood the name completely. The sky looked like someone had spilled cream on an endless black surface. Even though I've seen it in pictures, nothing compares to the real experience. I was lost in the wonder when a light suddenly flashed, and Wyatt sat up, grabbing his .22. "Did you hear that?" Wyatt whispered as his spotlight scanned the landscape. "No, I didn't hear anything." "What was it?" I asked, still looking at the stars. "If I knew, would I be asking you, numbnuts?" "I guess not." "Sorry. You may have gotten fatter over the last year, but you didn't get any smarter," Wyatt said. "Now, will you turn on your light and help me look?" I fumbled with my spotlight, and after a few nervous moments, I finally managed to switch it on and joined Wyatt in scanning our surroundings. I don't know if it's a common belief or a crazy idea with no science behind it. Outdoors, if folks, feel free to share, but spotlights used for spotting nighttime animals often use red light instead of white. I'm told it's because while red light helps humans see, most nighttime hunters like coyotes or bobcats don't notice it. So, while it's good for humans, animals with great night vision don't mind it. Even if all of this is true, looking for the source of a mysterious noise in the dark, rocky terrain lit by red light is spooky and unsettling. Thankfully, my own search didn't find anything, and I started focusing on the stars again. But then, we got confirmation that something was with us in the darkness. "Hello, fellow stargazers," a voice interrupted. It was friendly but uncomfortably close, like someone standing right beside us. I spun around, shining the light behind us, hoping it was one of the Plum's Ranch hands who stumbled upon us and not trying to scare us. But there was nothing, just endless prairie with no sign of life. While I was looking behind us, Wyatt stood up and walked towards the rock formations that marked the divide between the ranch and the Badlands. I glanced at him over my shoulder and saw him moving, his light pointing at something. That's when I noticed legs hanging from a ledge high up on one of the rock pillars. I said, "Hello, boys." "Now don't be rude." When someone says hello, you say, the mysterious voice sounded like a parent encouraging a toddler to reply to a waitress or store clerk. There was something familiar about the voice, and my age made me say, "Sorry." "Hello," with an uneasy glance between Wyatt and me. "Beautiful night to look up at the heavens, isn't it?" the voice continued. I felt a creepy feeling in my mind because the voice was so clear despite the distance. I've been in domed rooms where people on opposite sides can whisper and be heard. Even knowing this, the voice that night went beyond my doubts. It had to be at least 100 yards away, and normal talking wouldn't carry that far. The stranger spoke casually, and his words reached us like they floated on magical air. While I wondered about the how of the situation, Wyatt had a different question. "Who the heck are you?" Wyatt asked. Naughty, naughty. "What would Stacy think if she heard you using such foul language?" the stranger replied. Hearing his mom's name made Wyatt pause. He looked at me, doubt in his eyes, and mouth a surprised "what the heck?" Years of learning to respect adults kicked in for me. "Sorry about the language, mister. You just surprised us, is all." I was worried Wyatt might start using bad words, so I spoke to prevent that. "If you don't mind me asking, do you work for Pa Plum?" "Hawk," the voice said. "That brainless brute, goodness, no. I don't work for him, or anyone else. I am what you would call self-employed. An entrepreneur, if you will." "Okay, and what is an entrepreneur doing out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night?" I asked. "Entrepreneur, my boy," I could feel a bit of frustration in his voice. "And here I thought you were shaping up to be the brains of this operation." I'm beginning to wonder if either of you would even be worth the effort. Pity, a chance encounter like this rarely presents itself. The stranger sat on his rocky perch, deciding if he should continue. The wait was painful, and I didn't know what side I wanted his decision to fall on. Did I want to be worth the effort? The effort for what? An entrepreneur is a person who is always on the lookout for an opportunity to deal, he finally continued. Of course, when one is looking for opportunity, they must be willing to venture to the ends of the earth to find it. Makes sense enough, I guess, I agreed, not sure if it made sense at all. So glad to hear it, the voice said with renewed vigor. Especially since we are coincidentally sitting at the end of the earth. What a Looney Tune! Wyatt interrupted. You saying the world is gonna end, oh well man? No, not the end of the earth as in an event, but the end of the earth as in a location, the stranger corrected. A place where the earth stops being the earth and starts blending into the beyond. He paused, expecting us to have a bunch of questions. When we stayed silent, he decided to lead us further. This is a place where the rules of the earth, the rules that you live by every day, no longer hold sway. Because of this lack of regulation, this is an ideal spot to do business. Yeah? And what type of business you fixing to do in the middle of the night, in the middle of butt-freaking Egypt sitting on some rock? Wyatt mocked. Why, I am here to make deals. Everyone wants something, even people in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. Perhaps those types of people even more so, actually. Luckily for you, I'm one of the few that can deliver on the promises of those deals. What type of deal are you talking about? I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. Ah. The question of the night. I will give one and only one of you a great gift. The greatest gift either of you can imagine. I can imagine a lot, Wyatt responded. You gonna give me whatever I think up, no questions asked? No questions, but everything costs something, boy. And what this offer going to cost us? Wyatt followed up. All I ask in return for this gift is a soul. Our souls? Wyatt balked. Like a deal with the dang devil? Can you believe this, wacko? At that moment, I felt the mood in the air shift. It had been uneasy to start, but now for the first time, it felt hostile. My flight response demanded action, but my feet refused to follow the orders. Wyatt, on the other hand, had his fight response kick in gear. Hey, buddy, how about instead of a gift you give me one good reason why I shouldn't just shoot you right here, right now? As he made his threat, Wyatt shouldered his rifle and took aim at the stranger. You're trespassing on my paw's land, so ain't nothing stopping me other than my kind heart. Silence now, Wyatt, the stranger replied. Since you don't seem much interested in the potential of my offer, you can take some time off from this conversation. And with that, the stranger snapped his fingers. I watched what followed. Wyatt went to unleash another verbal tirade, to level the stranger with a cutting reply, but no sounds escaped his mouth. Wyatt lowered his gun as he struggled to force his voice to obey him, to make any sound at all, to talk, then finally to scream. He strained in a futile effort, no sound came. Realizing his efforts were hopeless, the fear on his face was replaced with anger. Deprived of his voice, Wyatt opted to communicate in a different way. He raised his gun, aimed it again at the stranger, and pulled the trigger. Click. We can't have that infernal contraption interrupting us either, Wyatt. Now please be a good boy and stay out of this. It was the first time the stranger had raised his voice, and the ground trembled at its force. That, at least, was my sense of things. Perhaps at that point, my fear was so great that I was shaking in a way that made it feel as if the ground quaked. Now, that's better, isn't it? We can hear ourselves think again. Pure bliss, the stranger exclaimed. Somewhere inside myself, I found my voice. So you're him then? The devil, I mean. Oh my, no! Not the silly religious figure you know, anyway. But the devil makes deals with people for their souls, and you're making us an offer if we give you our souls. I can see the similarity, but to be clear, that is not what I'm offering you. I am not making you an offer for your soul. I'm making one of you boys an offer to give up the other's soul, the stranger said in a matter-of-fact way. Wyatt and I made eye contact, and I read in his eyes that even with everything that had already happened that night, he was still not buying any of the stranger's BS. Don't look so skeptical there, Wyatt. You've had the great fortune to experience my work firsthand. After all, this is the same offer I gave to your father, and though he debated it for a good long while, he eventually gave up that drunk uncle of yours and never looked back. Even you have to admit the deal was as advertised. The last decade has been a financial boon for your family, hasn't it? All it cost was the soul of a man who couldn't be bothered to be sober during the most important decision of his life. You lie. I yelled. Me? Never. I may have many flaws and vices, but I'm happy to say that lies are not one of them, the stranger continued. You simply prefer ignorance to truth. Let us look at the facts, shall we? A failing company on the brink of bankruptcy lands an exclusive contract with the biggest retail chain in the country. I hear he may even take the company public next year. It's the stuff of white-collar fairy tales. I had no knowledge of any of this, but to keep the peace, I played along. Okay, say I believe you're telling the truth. How is this deal you suggest even possible? How can one of us give away the other's soul? Why? Because you have each already connected your souls to the other with that little ritual you two performed. Blood brothers, I believe you call it. Sorry, when you have been around as long as I have, it becomes difficult to keep generational terminology straight. But in the simplest explanation, you completed a blood oath, a warrior's bond. But that's just some stupid kid's game. It doesn't mean anything. I whined. A blood oath is a kid's game, the stranger said, disgusted. I've never heard of such absurdity. You two may not have fully understood the implications of the promise you made, but it doesn't make the effects any less real. Okay, so if this is all true, what do we get in return for giving you a soul? Whatever you want. His voice was brimming with smug confidence. Whatever hope or dream resides in that little head of yours. You could be rich, or strong, or smart. You could be blessed with a golden tongue capable of talking people into bending to your every desire. Imagine it. Loved by all who hear you speak, never lost for what to say, people willing to fulfill your every request once you ask it. At this, the stranger paused, and I could sense a smile in his voice. I may be wrong, but it appears that last bit might have struck a chord. I had never had any great desire for most of the standard genie wishes you hear about, but the final possibility, people willing to fulfill my every request, was intriguing. That said, I still didn't want to trust what the stranger was telling me, especially knowing the Plum family the way I did. If you can give us anything, then why would Mr. Plum ask for something as stupid as landing a business contract? Because he didn't ask for me to save his company. That happened because of what I gave him. What he wanted was much more devious. He asked that every person he met would instantly trust him completely and believe everything he told them. I imagine it all made landing new clients fairly mundane. I'm sure it made you feel an extra level of closeness to the Plum family when you met them. What if I say I don't want any of the stuff you've offered? I lied. What if I say I think you are full of poop? I didn't. What if I just decide to go home? I doubted I could. Then none of us leave here happy, the stranger said. Well, you two won't physically leave here at all, and I won't be happy. But this is a limited time offer, and I feel that this conversation is becoming tedious. Perhaps if you aren't interested, I should give Wyatt back his voice and see if he'd like to take me up on the opportunity. He seems to be made of similar stuff as his father, the type to speak first and think later. It's an ideal character flaw in a situation like this. In that moment, I saw Wyatt push forward and try to force a reply through the spell that had a hold on him. True terror turned over in my gut. What if he got his voice back and accepted? What would happen to me? I frantically searched for any options I might have at my disposal. I could feel hot tears stream down across my cheeks, and the icky feeling rise up in my throat. I felt hopeless. I didn't want to imagine Wyatt selling me out, but I now had proof that his father had given up his own brother. He had turned on family, and that same traitor's blood ran in Wyatt's veins. Plus, if everything Stranger said was true, did I really have any connection with the Plums at all? Was what I felt real, or just a magic trick passing as affection? A child should never be forced to make life or death choices, but under pressure, it is an exceptional cruelty. I'll do it, I declared into the night, and then fell to my knees, giving myself completely to despair. Please, I accept your offer. The moment I agreed, Wyatt collapsed. His spotlight hit the ground, shrouding the stranger in a veil of darkness. I scrambled toward Wyatt and pulled him to me. What did you do to him? I yelled. Why, I didn't do a thing to him, you did. You gave me his soul, and a body without a soul is but a doll, an empty vessel. Well, now, everything seems to be in order, and with our transaction complete, I must be off. Once the deal is done, the salesman must depart, no time for buyer's remorse. I bid you farewell, and good luck. Though you no longer have need for luck now, do you? At that, the stranger erupted into a fit of laughter that filled the night and then faded slowly into nothing. Bring him back, I cried into the abyss. I took my spotlight, which had been forgotten in my hand, and shined it onto the rocks where the stranger had once sat, yet found nothing. The stranger was gone, and I was left alone with Wyatt. I turned my attention back to the friend I had betrayed, grabbed his limp body, and in desperation attempted to hoist him to his feet. When he showed no sign of reaction, I grabbed hold of his arms and made the effort to drag him towards his grandfather's ranch. I took only 5 strained steps before I tumbled to the ground. The distance was too far, and I wasn't strong enough. For the second time in a span of mere moments, my self-preservation instincts kicked in, and I reacted with another shameful display. I ran home, leaving my friend alone in the night. When I reached Pa Plum's farmhouse and barged into his room, he was asleep. He was initially lost in the fog of the Sandman, but when I said that Wyatt was unconscious, he suddenly snapped into the moment. He quickly roused 2 of his farmhands, threw on his boots, and grabbed his spotlight. Then we all set out to find Wyatt. The adults led, and I followed hot on their heels, attempting to direct them to where Wyatt had collapsed. We were only about halfway back when Pa spotted the red beam of the discarded spotlight off in the distance and called over to the younger farmhand to haul ass and get there ahead of us. The farmhand saw where Pa was pointing and sped off into the darkness. When he reached the light, his silhouette illuminated in red spun frantically as he danced in the distance. What was he doing? Then a realization set in. He wasn't dancing. He was searching, unable to find any sign of my unconscious friend who should be right at his feet. Wyatt had vanished into the Badlands. After the initial search, Pa set to questioning me on what happened. It didn't take much explaining for me to convince them that I didn't see anything, that I had no idea where Wyatt had gone. When the sheriff arrived on the scene, he only had to talk with me briefly before he concluded that I didn't know anything. In fact, something about how I told my story convinced everyone I spoke with that I had no part in what happened that night. Every little follow-up or interrogation only made the authorities more confident of my innocence until they at last decided that I could return home with my parents. They never felt the need to harass me about the case again after that. The only person who didn't seem to trust my story was Mr. Plum. Though he never said so outright, I could tell by the looks he gave me that he knew the truth. I also knew he wouldn't say anything that might put his own past actions at risk. It has been a long time since the night I met the devil in the Badlands. Today I avoid rural areas and stick to the city. Being off in places devoid of civilization makes me uncomfortable now. I need lights on the world to find peace. Otherwise, my life has been pretty successful. I have a wife and 2 kids, a boy and a girl, a nice house, and nice cars. Despite the cost and the fact that the deal wasn't something I ever asked for, I have to admit that he has been true to his word. I have gotten what the devil promised. Though as good as life has been, if there was something I could do to fix things and set them right, please know that I would give up my gift to save my friend. It's simply not an option. My connection to Wyatt, our bond, has been destroyed forever. All I can hope to do now is live my life well enough that Wyatt's sacrifice was worth it. Yet even so, deep down, I sensed that Wyatt's soul wasn't the only one the devil claimed that night. When my life comes to an end many years from now, I know I'll face an eternity of retribution for the pain I've caused my friend. All because of a decision I made when I was only 13. Have you ever faced a decision with unforeseen consequences like the protagonist in the Badlands story? What mysterious or unexplainable events have you encountered in your life? Did the story resonate with any personal experiences of yours? And remember to hit like if the story gave you chills, subscribe for more gripping tales, and join our community of storytellers. Your support keeps the shadows alive.